Yeah, this is the end of the cat wolf. No, sure realize that, isn't? Yep. If I assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't notice. If I assume. Definitely. Right. If I assume, Julie. What's up? Oh, okay. Right. If I assume, Julie. Until I didn't notice. Right. No sure you realize that? Okay. No sure you realize that, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't notice. Yep. If I assume, Julie. Of course. If you assume, Julie. Have a was giving sure, isn't? Okay. Right. I did not wound that. Okay. And what should I do? What should I do? Oh, yep. There is. Okay. There is. Whew, okay. Yep, he was over here the whole time, Julie. If I can see him, yep. So, if I consume, yep. If you consume, Julie. If I was gonna make sure, like, what was that? If you consume. Hey, you did not realize that. I know, why? Yep. If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until you notice. Right. If I consume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. You did not realize that. I know. Why? Yep, if you consume, Julie. Right, of course. So you didn't know this. Nope. Okay. You sure realize that? Yep. If you consume. Yep. Okay. Just gonna make sure you realize that. I know, right? Yep. If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Sure, realize that? Yep. If I consume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Sure, realize that? Yep. If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. Sure, realize that? Yep. Okay. I was gonna make sure you realize that. I know. Why? Yep. Okay. If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. Until you didn't know this. Yep. Okay. If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. No sure you realize that? Yeah, yep. If you consume, Julie. Of course. If you consume, definitely. Right. You did not spoon that. I know, right? If you consume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that? Yep. If you consume. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Of course. If I consume, Julie. Right. Until I didn't know this. Nope. Okay. No sure realize that. Yep. If you assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. I'm not sure you realize that. Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. I'm not sure you realize that. Yep. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. I'm not sure you realize that. Yep. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. Not sure you realize that. I know, right? Yep. If I could assume, Lee. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Fry. If you could assume, Julie. Until you didn't know this. Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Until I realized that. Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure I realized that. Yep. Cause I said so. Fry. Not sure you realized that. Yep. Okay. Not sure you realized that. I know, right? Yep. Of course. Until I realized that. Fry. Not sure you realized that. Yep. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realized that. Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Definitely. Fry. Not sure you realize that. Yep. Okay. I'm not sure you realize that. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Nope. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Nope. Okay. If you could assume, Julie. I know, why? Yep. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Nope. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. If you could assume, Julie. Yep. Okay. If you could assume, Julie. I know, why? Yep, I was, Julie. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep, if you could assume, Julie. Of course. If you could assume, definitely. Until you didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep, if you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep, if you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Fry. Not sure you realize that? Yep, if I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I realized that. If I could assume. Yep, if you could assume. For Julie. Of course. Until I realize that. If I consume. Yep. If you consume Julie. Yep. If I consume. Fry. You did not point that. No way. Yep. Okay. No sure realize that. I know. Why? Yep. Okay. No sure realize that. Yep. Okay. No sure. Yep. Okay. No sure realize that. Yep. Right. You know sure you realize that? Yep. Okay. No sure vigilante. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. No sure realize that? Yep. If you could sue, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. No sure realize that? Yep. Okay. No sure realize that? Yep. Okay. No sure? Yep. Okay. Sure you realize that? Yep. If I could assume, virtually. Of course. If you could assume. Yep. Right. Did I realize that? Yep. Okay. It was good to make sure you realize that, virtually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Not sure you realize that? Yep. If you could assume, virtually. Until I didn't know this. Right. Not sure you realize that? Yep. If you could assume, virtually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Not sure you realize that? Yep. If I could assume, virtually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Yep. If I could assume, virtually. Right. Until you didn't know this. Nope. If you could assume, virtually. Right. Of course. If you could assume, Julie. Right. You did not believe that. I know, why? If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Yep. Okay. Does she realize that? I know, right? Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. Does she realize that? Yep. Okay. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Does she realize that? Yep. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I didn't know this. Right. Does she realize that? Yep. If you could assume, Julie. Of course. Until I realize that. Right. Does she realize that? Yep. Okay. Does she realize that? I know, right? Yep. If I could assume, Julie. Of course. Until you didn't know this. Right. Does she realize that? Yep. Okay. Does she realize that? I know, right? Yep. Okay. Bye. Did I realize that? Yep. Okay. I was gonna make sure. I know, are you? Yep.